Hello and welcome to a milestone episode. It's our 100th show. I'm your host, Adam Morris, joined by my co-host, Daniel Welling. Wow, I can't believe we've reached 100 episodes. We've had some amazing guests and some fascinating conversations. And here's to the next 100 episodes. Celebrating our episode today is our guest, Ozaruk from Ozaruk Consulting. And she specializes in process improvement for MSPs, in particular exploiting your PSA process around procurement. In this episode, you'll learn how to turn procurement into a profit center, how to manage client expectations and build scale without chaos, and how to streamline your workflow from quote to cash for stronger financial results. Seriously, there is tons of value in this podcast. And it's on a topic that is often ignored but crucial for all MSPs. We hope you find our episodes informative and valuable, and we're always eager for your feedback and introductions to experts in the MSP community. So ladies and gents, please welcome Ozaruk.
Monica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And Monica, I guess for the benefit of our audience, we've only known each other a short amount of time, but it feels like we've known each other a lot longer. And there's a compliment in there somewhere. We were introduced just maybe a month or so ago by mutual clients who've been working with you in the UK, specifically focusing around the procurement module in ConnectWise. And Adam and I were immediately fascinated by this topic because we see procurement, I don't know the right word, crashing into the effective production of management accounts, which is right in Adam's and I's wheelhouse. So, as Monica, I guess we'd love to share some of your wisdom with our listeners today. And we've come up with a clickbaity title, The Top 3 Procurement Mistakes. So maybe you'd like to kick us off with what you think the first one might be for MSPs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully, the first one is the same across the board for everything. It's that so many MSPs overcomplicate the process, or they think that procurement is this mythical beast of a quagmire of information that it's very difficult to untangle. And I think that's not necessarily the case. It doesn't have to be a scary word. Procurement is effectively just buying things, getting them in your warehouse or getting them purchased, delivering them to the client, and then invoicing for them. And that's the same process whether you're a $5 million MSP, a $10 million MSP, a $500,000 MSP. It doesn't really matter. The procurement process is actually very simple once you break it down and you just don't overcomplicate it.
Really wise words, and probably where a lot of my clients go wrong is actually it becomes complicated when you try and look at it through the filter of a PSA and how a PSA operates. Is there some truth to that maybe?
Absolutely. So many PSAs weren't built with procurement in mind first. So if you were to have started from a different system, it would make more sense. That flow would be a bit more logical. With some PSAs, and we won't name names, that module was tacked on later. So it almost feels intentionally confusing, and it does feel very frustrating because it feels like you're bootlegging your process through the system. And it feels that you're having to create a new process or do something differently every time. Whereas in reality, it is there. The system will support you. You can't make it complicated and you can't do something differently because you'll never remember how to do it again.
So we didn't use a particular module or piece of software. We just had a basic-ish Excel spreadsheet. It was good enough. Was it perfect? Probably not. What would you say then, while saying we want, it's not complicated and ultimately it's a simple process, in what way isn't a spreadsheet good enough? Or is it? I'm all ears.
I actually love a spreadsheet, and some of my clients are a bit chagrined when they come to me and they say, oh, we do everything offline. We do everything in a spreadsheet. And I don't mind that, especially if they're not making mistake number 2, which is not understanding responsibilities. So with procurement, you're working across multiple departments. You have all these different handoffs. You have all these opportunities for the information to get skewed, for people to put pressure on different departments. You have sales saying, we need to buy it today. We need to buy it today. And then maybe the client doesn't actually need it for 3 months or whatever it may be. So with a spreadsheet, I don't mind a spreadsheet if it has the responsibilities across the top and it shows that handoff and it shows how it should move. Unfortunately, where a spreadsheet is going to fall short with the pace of business and with the opportunities for integrations with your vendors, your spreadsheet isn't scalable. And that's unfortunately where we land. But if you start with a process, a written process, a spreadsheet, it's much easier to adopt a PSA because you do have an understanding of what it is that you're doing.
But would it be best ordinarily just to bite the bullet, invest in the right PSA tool set and kind of just follow the workflow that they've designed?
I don't know. I'm not always, if you're 1 or 2 people and you're doing everything on a whiteboard and it's working, maybe not. I don't believe that you need to invest right away. At that point, I would probably talk to your peers. I would do a lot of research and do a lot of demos to determine which PSA would work best for you, especially with customer support and those kinds of things, because a PSA is a huge investment. And once you pick one, you really shouldn't change it. So I don't know. I think if you're a very small shop and you're just getting started, maybe don't bite the bullet. If you hire a third person, that's probably about when you get a PSA.
Yeah. So once you're over that initial kind of very early days, then yeah, actually, if you want to scale, then use the right tool. And you mentioned briefly as well around integration to third parties. Just explain a little bit more about that, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're cutting a purchase order and, creating a purchase order to send to a vendor, that can be a very manual process. However, ConnectWise has some integrations. There's different things that you can do where that gets sent automatically. And then there's a better communication between you and your vendor as to the order status. If there's an issue with licenses, if they need more information, there's more of an automatic update between those two, as opposed to having that broken telephone across multiple systems.
And I'm assuming there's a limit then to the number of vendors that are going to integrate into those particular PSAs? Or
I think there should be a limit for you. So one thing I train is that you want to work with the best vendors, not necessarily every vendor. And this isn't one of the top 3 mistakes I see, but this is a mistake that I see where my clients are chasing the lowest cost and they work with every vendor under the sun. Not necessarily the best practice. You want to develop relationships with your suppliers. You want to have that trust. You want them to know who you are. You want to have a larger spend with a specific supplier because they will help you out. They'll look out for you in a downturn. And I think that's a competitive advantage a lot of MSPs don't necessarily see. But then, especially when we went through COVID and there were stock issues, inventory issues, it's the ones that had excellent relationships with their vendors that were able to kind of carry through.
Really interesting. And of course, most MSPs would be advocating that to their clients in turn. So
Yeah.
treat others as you would expect to be treated. Maybe that's a 3.1. We can add that to our show notes. And really interesting debate there about when and if and how to implement the PSA into the process. I was really interested in understanding the areas of responsibility. Perhaps you could expand on that a little. And in my experience, where I'm thinking here is when you're a one-person business and you're buying something and you're also doing the billing and you're also doing the installation and you know the whole process. There's no breaks in the chain of information. But of course, once you start to break that up and delegate it amongst other people, you've then got an overhead of that communication and knowledge flow. Is that what you were referring to with responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. It dovetails me into mistake number 3. So you're just
As if
right
we
on track here.
rehearsed this.
But the biggest problem I see and why I usually get my clients to call me and why I get brought in the first place is that you see the process, you see the responsibility. Someone will try within their MSP to create a little bit of a process flow, some documentation, some SOPs, but they stop before the end of the quote to cash process. And what I mean by that is, yes, they make sure that they buy something or that someone is buying something. And then, yes, it gets delivered to the client or it gets, the licenses get set up. But then, did we make sure that we invoiced for those things properly? Are we invoicing on a regular basis? Are we recovering that cost or recognizing the cost of all the purchases that we've made? And are we recognizing those costs at the right time? One thing that happens is sometimes my clients pull me in and their PSA system is great for the first couple steps. And then we, do a little bit of a cleanup, and all of a sudden the cost of goods that hits their accounting package is astronomical. And it's because they haven't been recognizing their costs through the process. So when it comes to responsibilities, every department needs to be involved. It affects everyone. And it should come out in the wash for financials. You should see the result of good procurement once you get to that financial aspect. And you should know when something has been closed and you've gotten it to the end of its life cycle. So the responsibilities can be very difficult. The handoffs can be difficult. However, if you have a PSA and you've put some triggers, some notifications, some responsibilities, and some understanding of that around it, then it should go smoothly from quote to cash.
We'll come back to the podcast in a minute, but first, I just want to introduce you to the mentoring service from MSP Finance Team. How long will you carry on struggling on your own, juggling cash flow, feeling like you're barely making ends meet, when the very reason you started your MSP was not just to help others master technology, but also to secure your own financial future? Or perhaps you've grown your MSP to a good size and are looking to prepare for an optimal sale or acquisition, but have never done it before. We've walked in your shoes. We're ex-MSP owners and have built our businesses from startup to exit and know exactly how it feels to be constantly firefighting or struggling to grow profit. And that's why our mentoring, or call it coaching if you prefer, exists to help you achieve the rewards you set out to achieve in the first place. More profit, more time, and the freedom to focus on what truly matters. So you're probably asking, why should we work with you? Well, we deliver results. Here are just two examples. A 10 million MSP with a 7-strong leadership team but lackluster results. Within just 2 quarters of working with us, their profits began to climb. At the end of year 1, their profits will have jumped from 300K to 1.3 million. But we're not that big, I hear you say. Well, we work with smaller MSPs as well. A 400K MSP was suffering a 10% loss before we engaged with them and were struggling to move forward for years. Again, within a 12-month period, we've turned that business around. They've got new clients, they've got their mojo back, and they made a 10% profit this year. If you'd like results like this, book a free consultation now at mspfinanceteam.com, and we'll discuss a burning issue that's been holding you back and give you several key actions to take away and implement completely free of charge with no further obligations. Don't settle for less. Make your MSP everything you dreamed it to be.
And that's almost exactly where I think Adam and I would be picking up on the interest in this topic, because that's exactly the problem we see. Like the one-time gross margin is like 50% one month and minus 100% the next month. And you're like, well, I think you've got a COGS timing issue here. and that's often the case. So yeah, really important topic for us in the finance department. And perhaps if we could go back to the which is best, the spreadsheet or the PSA, the barrier to entry with the PSA is, even if you're a 2-person business and you've got the PSA, it's like, well, it's going to slow us down surely in terms of our procurement process, and it's going to frustrate us, and we don't know how to do it, and that client really needs that laptop tomorrow, and we'll do that next week, we'll do that next month, and then starting to use it and not using it in the right way. So presumably that's the nub of how you help MSPs.
And anyone who does procurement, there's always pressure on those rules. So I think, having worked in procurement myself and having a postgraduate in procurement and supply chain, I have a lot of empathy for the people who are sitting in that chair, who are being told by this. And it feels like you're, drinking from a fire hose and you're constantly in this reactive setting, which is extremely stressful. I don't think it leads to a good culture. I think that it can be very easy to rush and to feel that there is a rush when it comes to procurement, that everything needs to happen immediately. However, if you take a step back, you look at some best practices. One thing I implement across all my clients is that you only buy on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that sounds crazy, crazy. To all my MSPs, they go, no, we buy when it's required. We buy right away. But the cost of actually putting a purchase order together has a human aspect. It takes time to put that purchase order together, to validate it, to send it to your vendor, and to follow up on it and make sure that it's going through the process. So limiting the number of purchase orders you create and batching them together on Tuesdays and Thursdays helps train the business. Sales gets all their sales in. They get everything closed on a Monday. Tuesday, you put a big batch of purchase orders out. Follow up on Wednesday. Thursday, anything that didn't get in for your Tuesday. And all of a sudden, your procurement flows so much nicer. Your vendors also know when to expect purchase orders from you too. So that's helping with that relationship, and it's helping your procurement person maintain their sanity.
What a top tip there. What a top tip.
It's my mind now sort of going around in circles, trying to just process that. But there's gold dust, I think, in there.
It's right. Isn't
Yeah,
it? It's
yeah,
right.
absolutely. And training the expectations with your clients is right front and center of this, of course. But you know what, Mr. Client, to get the level of service from us, you need to work alongside us. This is the best way it works. And I guess, like everything, there are always exceptions. But the point is, of course, you want them to be exceptions. You want to have this workflow in there. I really like it. Love it.
And my mind is now charging on to, if it's far more controlled and disciplined rather than immediate and all the time basis, well, now we can delegate it, we can outsource it in a far more achievable manner, rather than the immediate state, the startup state of, yes, I'll do it straight away and I'll do it for no money at all, and whatever you want, I'll just do it. Of course, that just leads to burnout and stress and lots of issues and errors. So yeah, really interesting. And I can't tell you how, probably once every week, maybe once every 2 weeks, I'm on a call with a client and they are grumbling about how their workflow has been interrupted by a client employing someone and saying, we got a new starter tomorrow morning and we need it set up, and this is white gloves, you've got to be there to support the user. Well, did you only hire them now, like an hour ago? Surely there's got to be some discipline. So I love Adam's point about this helps condition your client as well.
Yeah, I think it's part of an overall theme, actually. If you just take a step back as well, it doesn't just hit procurement, it hits service tickets, project management, account management, etc., out of hours, whatever it is, whatever the type of services you're offering. And I think there's a tendency when you're a low maturity MSP to just give what the client asks for all the time, because that's what business is. That's what good service is, right? Well, no, it isn't actually. And you work that out over time slowly or quicker if you're good. And you realize actually a good MSP is about managing expectations and delivering consistent high quality services. And that can only be done through workflow and carefully planned approach and managing expectations of the client. So I think this fits in really well with that whole thing. I really like it. It works on that, exactly the point that Dan made. You didn't just hire this guy 2 hours ago. It's been weeks in the planning. We've explained to you what our SLA looks like around this. This is why we need you to follow this SLA. Things happen in the right order, in the right way, and we can make sure it's there for you 9 o'clock, ready to go. So yeah, love it.
And I think too, it touches on that there are those additional charges you can charge. So if a client says, well, we need it tomorrow, then you say, absolutely, that's something that we upcharge for, that white glove. We have to incur rush charges, or we have to buy something. Right now, my MSPs are all incurring rush charges and not charging those back to their client. That's just something that they are continually noticing freight going up, or they're noticing the rush charge going up. And if you don't leverage your PSA, if you don't already have the bones of your procurement process set up, how are you adding these additional charges? And how are you determining how much it's eating away at your margin? I see people drop shipping things to client sites. Okay, how does that impact client delivery and how they feel about it? So it's not just looking at procurement as a cost center, it's also understanding if there are upcharges, if there are good, better, best deliveries that need to happen there as well.
Can I just come back to the supplier piece, which you touched on earlier? I think that seems to be a huge aspect overall in procurement. So what tips do you have for supplier selection, how you manage suppliers, how you work alongside them? If it's not just about price, what else is it, and how does that ultimately impact the bottom line when you're going around working with suppliers?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just did a YouTube video about this, about vendor scorecarding. So the supply chain term is vendor scorecarding. Again, I don't know if my YouTube channel is as fun as yours, you guys, but
Probably not.
it's a little more technical. But what's interesting about vendor scorecarding is that you're looking at a few different things. So on-time delivery, in terms of do they deliver when they say they're going to? Customer service and feedback. A lot of the time, MSPs think, well, I've submitted my purchase order, everything must be fine. No, you need an order confirmation. You need some sort of process that says, yes, we've received your order. Here are some back orders, or here are some issues. When something goes wrong, so the third one is returns. If you ever have to return something, if you ever have to RMA a product, or if you have an issue with something that's out of warranty, if you have licenses that expire, but you need to push them a month or something, what does that look like? And then overall, the availability. Do they have what you need? Do they have the products that you need? And do they carry them consistently? If you build a really good relationship with your supplier, you can tell them what you need, work with them to forecast that a little bit. Again, this is a more mature MSP, but I have some clients where their vendors carry stock just for them. And they've gotten to that level where there's an on-hand bit of stock that they know is available for them at any given time.
Another thought moving this from cost to profit center is that if you've got this high level of maturity in terms of how you approach procurement and ultimately supply to your client, then by describing this discipline and diligence, you actually support a much higher margin than if you're rush, best price compared to I can buy that from so-and-so for $1, £1 less, so I went with them. Whereas if you're turning the tables on this, you can be, well, this costs us money. And therefore, we can't afford to sell at anything less than a 20% gross margin, by the way. And a lot of MSPs end up languishing around the 5 to 10% level. And I mean, if you do $1 million or pounds at 5%, that 50,000 is gone in admin. So you've effectively made no money at all, if you're lucky. If you're lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it doesn't have to be that complicated. I do always recommend to my clients that they hire a procurement role, which sometimes they think, well, that's more admin overhead. That's a lot. I don't have time to hire. I don't have time to designate someone with those responsibilities. If you're leveraging your system, it does go relatively quickly in terms of the purchase order process and all these things. I do see so many benefits and possibilities with automation, with RPA. There's a lot of things that will be streamlined, especially in procurement from a quick wins perspective. But then you can start to have those vendor scorecarding. This person, if they understand your procurement process, if they understand who you're working with, can start to have higher level conversations, forecasting, controlling those costs, and making sure you have line of sight into what a job costs today and that it's still going to cost the same in 3, 6, 9 months.
Brilliant. And of course, I guess just to take a step back from procurement, you've actually got the sales and quoting process ahead of that. And ahead of that, you've got your client management, your QBRs, TBRs, whatever term you apply. And an element of that is budgeting with the client. So the Windows 10 support cessation is one of the low-hanging fruits this year for MSPs and IT in general. So, we know how many machines need to be replaced. So we don't want to leave it until October. So let's work out what order we're going to do them in. And we can actually go and buy those machines now, or we can secure the stock. We can schedule in the engineering time and get well ahead of it, rather than the fail and replace methodology of, it's a 7-year-old machine. It's probably going to go pop at some point in the next 6 months and a year. And when it happens, we'll just rely on you sorting out really quickly for us. Thanks. Well, no, we can't do that. We need a 3-year refresh cycle, and we need planned replacement. And again, it just all pushes back towards pipelining, forecasting, ending up with a much more manageable control business.
Just have a question about stock, which you talked about earlier briefly. When does it make sense for an MSP to hold stock, or does it ever make sense to hold stock?
I mean, 2 years ago, I would have told you you don't need it. I would have said, most of my MSPs aren't carrying stock. It's fine. You'll be fine. That is starting to change. And what's very interesting is that I have a few clients in the professional AV installation who also use ConnectWise, and they're doing $1 million projects that are mostly hardware. They do connected Teams rooms or Zoom rooms, and they do those installations for their clients, and they carry $2 to $3 million worth of stock. They're also using ConnectWise. They're also using the inventory module, and we have all these warehouse management tools, best practices that we've built in. I'm starting to see my MSPs carry buffer stock of what they sell all the time. They're stocking up on cables. They're trying to reduce delivery costs or shipping costs to bring things in. So they're ordering in larger quantities. And they're designating a room at first, and then maybe 2 rooms. And then we see a little mini warehouse, and they're starting to grow the things that they're carrying on hand. It's usually, or best practice again, should be a limited list. So you should have internally a list of things that you're committed to carrying on hand, and communicate that across your business, especially to sales. Let sales know these are the products that we're going to carry a couple extra of on hand. So when you're quoting to a client that needs things right away, or never gives us a heads up, or always has those last minute, quote them on these products. And that's enhancing client delivery and reducing those inbound shipping costs. It is a little bit more of a maturity thing. I would say that it's not right at the beginning, but once you're hitting 4 or 5 million, you're probably carrying a little bit of extra inventory on hand, just to make sure that you can keep your techs busy too.
And are you able to monetize that additional level of service to your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Because then you're giving that white glove next day delivery service. So if you say it takes a little while, we have to order it in, and they're tired of hearing that, you can say, well, if you order from this list, we can get it to you next day. And absolutely, you could start to monetize for that.
I think that's where I see the key component here, is because there's obviously a cost of holding stock, right? Cash flow cost, there's a warehousing space cost, there's a security risk, whatever. So you need something back for it. And whether that's more sales or higher margin sales or longer term contracts or something else is where I'm coming from on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I do see lack of inventory as an opportunity cost for delivery as well. So if you have jobs scheduled and then there's a delay and you can't get your techs on site and they're sitting around and you're paying them to do nothing because they can't deliver on that job, or there's one piece of hardware that they need to complete something, I think that there's always a lost cost there that happens as well.
Interesting. And of course, the other option with inventory is to actually push that onto your client. So it's a good idea to have 2 or 3 machines always available, so that if there's a support issue, we can swap out. And that's why everyone has the same model of machine, the same docking station, the same screens. And even with the sort of newer, more agile virtual business that perhaps doesn't have an office, you can avail of stock holding facilities. Logistics providers now have that as a facility to have stock pre-configured, ready to go, closer to the client's users. So, and again, these are all maturity and high service level offerings to the client, again, they come at a premium, you make more money from them.
Yeah. And I think too, in terms of monetizing and having things close, another way that a lot of MSPs aren't taking advantage of, carrying stock or buying stock early is collecting a down payment from their customer. Whenever I have an MSP, it's so interesting because they go, well, okay, I'm buying this stock, I'm bringing it in, I'm taking on this risk, I have all these additional costs. You can charge earlier. And especially if your PSA has been set up this way, you can invoice your stock early. You could say, yes, we will do this project, but you have to pay for the hardware up front. And I see so many of my MSPs moving that way, which helps to mitigate that cost. And you realize a little revenue earlier as well. So,
And by the way, if you collect the money before you've delivered it and then you have credit terms with your supplier, you're actually cash flow positive for that period as well. So even better.
Yeah, the one objection I wasn't very good at handling was when the client said, well, hang on a minute, well, I can go and buy it from XYZ then and get 30 days. So come on, give us your response to that, Monica. What's your answer?
oh, I had a client who said, oh, we buy everything on Amazon because it delivers so quickly and it comes in, it's so easy. And I said, no problem. Has that price ever changed? And they said, well, it changes every day. I said, up to what? What's the upper limit that price is going to change to? You're not building a relationship. You're not doing anything in terms of forecasting. It might be fine today, and then all of a sudden it's out of stock or it's double the price, or you can't find it anymore, or it breaks and then you have to return it. And I think that's a problem too. You can buy something on Amazon and yes, you can return it, but now you're 3 days late to delivering that to the client.
It's exactly all of those things. And it's back to, well, actually, what do you want us to do for you? What's the value to you? And actually, part of the value is that you don't have to do IT procurement. We can do it for you, right? So actually, that's really what the conversation is ultimately about, isn't it?
Yeah. And any MSPs listening that are having that margin justification conversation with their clients, feel free to point them to this episode so that the clients can listen to just what's involved in delivering a laptop, a £2,000 laptop, and whether you make £50 or £400 margin on it, you can understand what that's worth to you as an end client. So, Monica, I think it's been a fascinating conversation. We're absolutely on budget time-wise, so I think there's an elegance to that. We've been disciplined in our procurement and our podcasting today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. If any of our listeners would like to reach out to you and carry on the conversation, how best to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's my website. It's Ozaruk Consulting, which hopefully we can write that down somewhere because I don't think that there's an easy
We
way.
might spell it wrong, but yes.
Yeah, you guys both said it right, which is excellent. And then, yeah, I have an 8-week procurement course as well. And so this is obviously something I've seen time and time again. I see my clients, especially my MSPs who have run the procurement module in their ConnectWise for a while and it gets really messy and they don't know what to do with it. So there's an 8-week course from cleanup to run state. And that's on my website as well. So they can always check that out.
And if they don't have ConnectWise, do they still get value from your course?
Absolutely. Yeah. They would get more value on a one-to-one basis, which is something that I offer as well. And again, procurement is the same no matter what system you're using. Don't overcomplicate the process. There's always things that you can do to highlight those responsibilities and get you from quote to cash.
Very good. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you ever so much,
Thank
Monica.
you.